The gunshot echoed through the Dakota Territory wilderness, just as Katherine Davies pressed her back against the weathered barn wall, her wedding dress slipping off her shoulder to reveal a deep purple bruise that told only part of the story. It was August of 1878, and the summer heat made the air shimmer above the dusty ground of Fort Laramie, Wyoming Territory, where Katherine had lived her entire 20 years. The dress she wore had belonged to her mother, passed down with love and careful stitches, though now it bore a fresh tear along the hem where she had caught it on a nail during her escape. The ivory fabric, yellowed with age and precious memories, hung loosely on her smaller frame, but she had spent 3 weeks adjusting it, determined to honor the woman who had died bringing her into this world. The wedding was supposed to start in an hour. Katherine should have been in the small church on Main Street, surrounded by what few friends she had left in this harsh territory. Instead, she was hiding behind the old Miller barn, listening to angry voices calling her name. Katherine, that was Thomas Brennan, the man she was supposed to marry. His voice carried the edge of whiskey and rage that she had learned to recognize over the past 6 months. "Get out here right now, girl. You are making a fool of me in front of the whole town." She pressed her hand over her mouth to muffle her breathing. The bruise on her shoulder throbbed where Thomas had grabbed her that morning when she had suggested, gently as she could, that perhaps they should wait another month before marrying. His response had been immediate and violent, and Katherine had seen her future flash before her eyes in that moment. If he treated her this way before their vows, what would marriage bring? So she had run, torn dress and all, away from the boarding house where she lived, away from the future that had seemed inevitable just hours ago. "I saw her come this way," another voice called. That was Thomas's brother, Marcus, equally drunk and twice as mean. "She cannot have gone far in that ridiculous dress." Katherine's fingers found the small locket around her neck, the only other thing she had from her mother. Her father had given it to her on her 16th birthday, 4 years before consumption had taken him too, leaving her alone in a world that had little patience for unmarried women without family or fortune. Thomas Brennan had seemed like a solution to her problems, a stable ranch hand with prospects. She had ignored the warning signs, desperate for security. She would not ignore them now. The voices grew distant, moving toward the creek on the other side of the barn. Katherine seized her chance and lifted her skirts, running as quietly as she could toward the tree line beyond the settlement. Her mother's dress caught on brush and thorns, acquiring new tears with each desperate step, but she did not slow down. Freedom, she realized, was worth more than fabric, even fabric soaked in memory and love. She had no plan, no horse, no supplies. She had nothing but the torn dress and her determination not to marry a man who would hurt her. The trees swallowed her whole, pine and cottonwood providing cover as she stumbled through underbrush. Her fancy wedding shoes, also borrowed, were utterly impractical for running through the Wyoming wilderness. She kicked them off and continued barefoot, feeling pine needles and sharp stones beneath her feet but welcoming the pain as proof she was still free, still choosing her own path. Katherine ran until her lungs burned and her legs trembled. She ran until the voices behind her faded completely. She ran until she stumbled over a root and fell hard onto the forest floor, her mother's dress now torn in 3 places, dirt staining the ivory fabric beyond recognition. She lay there for a moment, gasping for air, wanting to cry but finding herself too tired even for tears. The afternoon sun filtered through the trees in golden shafts, and somewhere nearby a creek babbled over stones. She had no idea where she was or what she would do next. That was when she heard the horse. Katherine scrambled to her feet, pressing herself against a large pine trunk. She held her breath as the sound of hoofbeats grew closer, slow and measured, not the frantic pace of pursuit. Through the trees, she caught sight of a rider, a man on a dusty brown quarter horse, leading a pack mule behind him. He was tall in the saddle, wearing typical cowboy gear, worn leather chaps, a faded blue shirt, a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the sun. A rifle rested in a scabbard on his saddle, and saddlebags suggested he had been traveling for some time. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with sun-darkened skin and the easy posture of someone who spent more time with horses than people. Katherine knew she should stay hidden. A woman alone in the wilderness, even in a wedding dress, was vulnerable in ways she barely wanted to acknowledge. But the alternative was making her way back to Fort Laramie on foot, with no food or water, likely to be found by Thomas and his brother before she made it anywhere safe. The rider was nearly past her position when her body made the decision for her. Her foot slipped on the carpet of pine needles, sending a small cascade of forest debris down the slight incline. The man reacted instantly, his hand going to his rifle as he turned in the saddle. His eyes, she noticed, were a striking shade of gray-green, alert and intelligent beneath the brim of his hat. "Who is there?" His voice was calm but carried easily through the trees. "Show yourself." Katherine stepped out from behind the pine, acutely aware of how she must look. Barefoot, dress torn and dirty, hair falling from the careful arrangement she had pinned up that morning. She raised her hands to show she meant no harm. "Please," she said, her voice hoarse from running. "I need help." The man studied her for a long moment, taking in the ruined wedding dress and her disheveled state. His hand left the rifle and he dismounted in one smooth motion, leading his horse closer but stopping a respectful distance away. "You are a long way from anywhere in a wedding dress," he observed. His voice held a slight accent she could not quite place, maybe Texas or further south. "Are you hurt?" "Not exactly." Katherine fought the urge to cover the bruise on her shoulder, knowing the gesture would only draw attention to it. "I need to get away from Fort Laramie, as far away as possible." The man's eyes flickered to her shoulder, then to the tears in her dress, and she saw understanding dawn in his expression. His jaw tightened slightly, but when he spoke again, his voice remained gentle. "My name is Daniel Ford. I am a horse trader heading up to Montana Territory with these animals. I passed through Fort Laramie about an hour ago." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "There was a commotion in town, people talking about a missing bride. That would be me." Katherine lifted her chin, refusing to be ashamed. "And I intend to stay missing." Daniel studied her face for another long moment. She met his gaze steadily, willing him to see that she was serious, that this was not some foolish girl's flight of fancy but a desperate bid for survival. "What is your name?" he asked finally. "Katherine Davies." "Well, Miss Davies, I cannot in good conscience leave you alone in these woods with night coming on and no supplies." He gestured to his pack mule. "I have a camp about 2 miles north, near a good water source. You are welcome to share my fire and food, and in the morning we can figure out what to do next." Katherine felt tears prick her eyes at this simple kindness from a stranger. "Thank you. I have no money to pay you, nothing to offer in return." "Did I ask for payment?" Daniel's expression softened. "Come on, can you ride?" "Yes, I grew up around horses." "Good." He moved to his pack mule and rummaged in one of the saddlebags, producing a worn pair of moccasins. "These will be too big, but better than walking barefoot. They belong to my mother. She passed 2 years back, but I keep them." "Seems foolish, but I am glad for it now." Katherine accepted the moccasins with trembling hands. They were beautiful work, decorated with simple beadwork in blue and red patterns. "I cannot take these if they were your mother's." She would want them used, not moldering in a saddlebag. Daniel turned back to his horse. She always said the best way to honor the dead is to help the living. Katherine slipped the moccasins onto her feet. They were indeed too large, but she could tighten the laces enough to make them workable. The soft leather felt like a blessing after the rough forest floor. Daniel mounted his horse and then offered his hand. "You can ride behind me. The camp is not far." She hesitated only a moment before accepting his hand. He pulled her up behind him with surprising ease, and she settled onto the horse's back, acutely aware that propriety demanded she not put her arms around a strange man's waist. But propriety had no place in the wilderness, and when the horse started moving, she grabbed hold of his belt to steady herself. They rode in silence through the forest. Daniel guided his horse with the easy confidence of someone who knew the land well, following a path that was barely visible to Katherine's eyes but apparently clear enough to him. The pack mule followed obediently behind, loaded with supplies and goods. "You said you are a horse trader?" Katherine asked finally, needing to break the silence. "Yes, madam. I buy horses down in Colorado and New Mexico, break the ones that need it and sell them up north where they are scarce. It is a living." "You travel alone, mostly?" "I had a partner for a few years, but he settled down in Denver last spring. Got married, started a freight business." Daniel's voice carried a hint of amusement. "Some men are meant for settling, some for moving. I never could stay in one place long." Katherine absorbed this information. A traveling man, no ties, no permanent home. Under normal circumstances, her father would have steered her far away from such a person. But these were not normal circumstances, and she was beginning to realize that everything she had been taught about safety and propriety had led her straight toward marrying a man who would have made her life a misery. "How old are you, if you do not mind my asking?" Daniel said. 20 years. "You?" 24, old enough to know better than to get involved in other people's troubles. He said it lightly, but Katherine heard the truth beneath. He was taking a risk helping her. "I understand if you want to leave me at your camp and go on your way," she said quietly. "I would not want to bring trouble down on you. Too late for that, I reckon. Besides, I have never been good at turning my back on people who need help." He guided the horse around a fallen log. "My mother used to say it was my greatest weakness and my greatest strength, all wrapped up together." "She sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was." His voice softened. "Apache and Spanish both, though she lived with my father from the time she was 16. Taught me to respect the land, respect people, and never trust a man who is cruel to those weaker than him." Katherine tightened her grip on his belt as the horse navigated a steep section of trail. "Your father died when I was 14. Thrown from a horse, broke his neck. Quick, at least. My mother never got over it, though she lived another 10 years. I think her heart was broken, and the rest of her just took time to catch up. I am sorry. Life in the territories is hard. You know that as well as I do, I imagine." They crested a small rise and Katherine saw the camp spread out below them. Daniel had not been exaggerating about the water source. A clear creek ran through a small meadow, surrounded by pine trees that would provide both shelter and firewood. Someone had used this spot before. There was a ring of stones for a fire and a level area where a tent could be pitched. Daniel dismounted and helped Katherine down. Her legs were shaky after the ride, and she stumbled slightly. He steadied her with a hand on her elbow, then immediately stepped back to give her space. "I will get a fire started and put some coffee on," he said. "There is salt pork and beans, not fancy but filling. You can clean up at the creek if you like. I will stay here, give you privacy." Katherine nodded gratefully. She made her way to the creek, acutely aware of how she must look. The water was shockingly cold, fed by mountain snowmelt even in August, but she welcomed the chill. She washed her face and hands, then tried to assess the damage to her mother's dress. 3 major tears, countless small ones, stains that might never come out. She felt a surge of grief, not for Thomas or the wedding, but for the dress itself. Her mother had worn it to marry Catherine's father in 1856, a small ceremony in Ohio before they had headed west seeking fortune and finding hardship instead. The dress had survived that journey, survived years in a trunk, survived Catherine's careful alterations. Now it looked like exactly what it was, a symbol of a life that was never meant to be. She heard Daniel moving around the camp behind her, the sounds of a practiced traveler making a temporary home. The snap and crackle of a new fire, the clank of a coffee pot, the soft sounds he made talking to his animals. When she finally returned to the fire, he had spread a bedroll for her near the warmth but not too close, and was stirring a pot of beans that smelled better than anything she could remember eating. "Sit, please," he gestured to the bedroll. "Food will be ready soon." Katherine sat, pulling the torn dress around her legs. The evening air was growing cool now that the sun was setting, and she was grateful for the fire's warmth. Daniel poured coffee into 2 tin cups and handed her one. She wrapped her hands around it, letting the heat seep into her cold fingers. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For all of this, you did not have to help me." "No, I did not have to." Daniel settled onto his own bedroll across the fire from her. "But I wanted to. There is a difference." They sat in comfortable silence while the beans finished cooking. Daniel served them onto tin plates with chunks of hard bread, and Katherine discovered she was ravenous. She could not remember the last time she had eaten, probably breakfast before everything had gone wrong. "Can I ask what happened?" Daniel said after they had both eaten for a while. "You do not have to tell me if you do not want to, but it might help to talk about it." Katherine considered his question. Something about this man, this stranger who had shown her nothing but kindness, made her want to trust him. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was the genuine concern in his gray-green eyes. "I was supposed to marry Thomas Brennan this afternoon," she began. "I have known him for 6 months. He seemed like a good man, stable, hard-working. I am an orphan with no family, no prospects. Marriage seemed like my only real option." She paused, sipping her coffee. "But this morning, when I suggested we wait a bit longer before the wedding, he grabbed me, hard enough to bruise. And I saw something in his eyes, something mean and cruel, and I knew that if I married him my life would become a kind of prison." Daniel's jaw clenched, but he said nothing, letting her continue. "So I ran. In my wedding dress with no plan, no destination, just ran." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I did not even grab a coat or any money, I just knew I had to get away." "You did the right thing," Daniel said firmly. "A man who would hurt you before the wedding would only get worse after. You trusted your instincts, and your instincts were right." "My father would have been horrified. A lady does not run away from her wedding. A lady does not travel alone with a strange man. A lady maintains her reputation above all else." Katherine met Daniel's eyes across the fire. "But I suppose I am not much of a lady anymore." "I think you are braver than most people I have met, man or woman." Daniel set down his plate. "And for what it is worth, your reputation is safe with me. I know what it is like to be alone in the world, to have to make hard choices just to survive. I would never take advantage of that." Katherine believed him. It should have been foolish, trusting a stranger so completely, but something in her gut told her that Daniel Ford was exactly what he appeared to be, a good man trying to do right in a hard world. "What will you do?" Daniel asked. "You cannot go back to Fort Laramie, not if Thomas is there." "I know." Katherine had been trying not to think about this. I have no skills except basic sewing and cooking, no references for domestic work. I suppose I could try to find a position in one of the larger towns, maybe Cheyenne or Denver. That is a possibility. Daniel poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling up into the darkening sky. Or you could come with me to Montana. I know a family there, good people who run a ranch. They are always looking for help, and Mrs. Patterson specifically needs someone who can sew. Their last seamstress moved back east last spring. Katherine stared at him. You would do that. Take me with you. It is a long journey, maybe 2 weeks of travel. But yes, I would. You would have to help with camp chores and such, but it would get you far away from Thomas Brennan and give you a chance to start fresh. He met her eyes. I am not asking for anything in return if that is your worry. Just company on the trail and maybe help with cooking since I am terrible at it. I barely know you. True enough. But you trusted me enough to come to my camp to share my fire. Sometimes in life you have to make choices with incomplete information. He smiled slightly. Besides, I have a feeling you are a good judge of character when you are not desperate and being rushed into bad decisions. Katherine thought about his offer. Montana was far away, far enough that Thomas would never find her. And something about Daniel Ford made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since her father died. He was offering her a real chance to start over. All right, she said finally. I will come with you to Montana, and I promise I am a good cook, better than adequate at camp chores. You will not regret this. I do not think I will. Daniel stood and began to bank the fire for the night. We will leave at first light, get as much distance as possible. Thomas might come looking for you, though I doubt he will track this far into the wilderness. He set up a small tent for her, stringing canvas between trees with practiced efficiency. You take this. I will sleep under the stars. I prefer it anyway. Katherine wanted to protest, but exhaustion was crashing over her in waves now that she had food in her stomach and relative safety around her. She crawled into the tent, still wearing her mother's torn dress because she had nothing else, and lay down on the bedroll Daniel had provided. Through the open flap of the tent, she could see him settling down near the fire, his rifle within easy reach. He was keeping watch, she realized, making sure she was safe through the night. For the first time in months, maybe years, Katherine Davies fell asleep feeling protected rather than afraid. She woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Daniel talking softly to his animals. Gray dawn light filtered through the tent, and she could hear birds beginning their morning songs. Her body ached from yesterday's running and rough sleeping, but her mind felt clearer than it had in a long time. When she emerged from the tent, Daniel was packing up the camp with efficient movements. He had clearly been awake for a while. Good morning, he said, handing her a cup of coffee. I saved you some breakfast, just jerky and hard biscuits, but it will keep you going. Katherine accepted the food gratefully. In the morning light, she could see Daniel more clearly. He was handsome in a weathered, practical way, with strong features and eyes that seemed to notice everything. His dark hair needed cutting, curling slightly over his collar, and he moved with the unconscious grace of someone completely comfortable in his own skin. How far to Montana? She asked. About 200 miles, give or take. We will follow the Bozeman Trail north for most of it, though I know some shortcuts that avoid the main roads. Safer that way, fewer questions. He finished tying down a pack on the mule. You can ride the mule today. She is slower than my horse but steady, and you will be more comfortable than riding double. They broke camp within the hour. Daniel helped Katherine onto the mule, and she settled into the rhythm of travel as they headed north through the forest. The morning was cool and pleasant, though Katherine knew the afternoon heat would be brutal. As they rode, Daniel told her about Montana, about the ranch where the Pattersons lived, about the landscape and the opportunities there. He talked about his work, about horses and how to raid them, about the satisfaction of taking a wild animal and earning its trust rather than breaking its spirit. Katherine found herself relaxing into his company. Daniel had an easy way of talking that never felt forced or demanding. He would fall silent for long stretches, comfortable with quiet, then share some observation about the land or the weather or the animals they passed. Around midday, they stopped to rest the animals and eat a quick meal. Katherine took the opportunity to attempt some repairs on her dress, using a needle and thread from Daniel's surprisingly well-stocked saddlebags. "My mother taught me to sew," he explained when he saw her surprise. Said any man traveling alone needed to know how to mend his own clothes and cook his own food. Self-sufficiency, she called it. She was right. Katherine worked on closing one of the larger tiers. The dress would never be beautiful again, but at least she could make it more functional. "I wish I had known her. She would have liked you. She always had time for people with courage." They traveled until dusk, covering good distance. Daniel set up camp near a stream, and this time Katherine helped, learning his system for arranging supplies and tending the animals. She proved her earlier claim by making a much better stew than his usual beans and salt pork, using wild onions she had spotted near the water and some dried herbs from his stores. "This is delicious," Daniel said around a mouthful of stew. "You are not exaggerating about being a good cook." "My father made sure I learned. He said a woman should be able to take care of herself and others, that it was a kind of power." Katherine smiled at the memory. He was ahead of his time in some ways. "He sounds like he was a good man." "He was. I miss him every day." As the stars came out overhead, they sat by the fire and talked. Daniel told her about growing up half Apache, about the prejudice he had faced, and how his mother had taught him to be proud of both his heritages. Katherine told him about her childhood in Ohio, the journey west, the dreams her parents had held that never quite materialized. "My mother died in childbirth," Katherine said quietly. "My father never remarried, even though everyone said he should. He said he had loved once, truly loved, and that was enough for a lifetime. That is beautiful and sad at the same time. Most love stories are, I think." Katherine pulled the torn dress tighter around her shoulders as the night air grew cold, at least the real ones. Daniel disappeared into his packs and emerged with a worn leather jacket. "Here, take this. I have another." The jacket smelled like leather and horses and something else, something distinctly Daniel. Katherine pulled it on gratefully, swimming in its size but welcoming the warmth. Over the next several days they fell into a comfortable rhythm. Wake at dawn, travel until midday, rest during the hottest hours, travel again until dusk. Daniel taught Katherine things about wilderness survival that her sheltered upbringing had never included. How to read the sky for coming weather, which plants were edible and which poisonous, how to start a fire with damp wood. In return, Katherine took over the cooking entirely, made small repairs to Daniel's clothes and gear, and proved surprisingly skilled at helping with the horses. She had grown up around them and had a natural way with animals that Daniel appreciated. They talked about everything and nothing. Daniel told her stories about his travels, about strange towns and stranger people, about stampedes and storms and narrow escapes. Katherine told him about books she had read, about the small dreams she had harbored before Thomas Brennan had seemed like her only option. "I always wanted to learn to read better," Daniel admitted one evening. "My mother taught me basics, but I never had much schooling. I can read enough to get by, but not like educated folks." "I could teach you," Katherine offered. "I do not have any books with me, but when we reach Montana, if you wanted." "I would like that." Daniel smiled at her across the fire, and Katherine felt something warm unfold in her chest. She was beginning to realize, with a mixture of excitement and terror, that she was developing feelings for Daniel Ford. It was completely impractical. They had known each other less than a week. He was a traveling man with no interest in settling down. She was running from one disastrous, almost marriage, and in no position to consider another romantic entanglement. But her heart, it seemed, did not care about practical considerations. She noticed the way Daniel's eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentleness of his hands when he tended to his animals, the way he always made sure she was comfortable and safe without being overbearing about it, the sound of his laugh, rare but genuine. And sometimes, she caught him looking at her with an expression she could not quite read, something soft and wondering that made her pulse quicken. On their 8th day of travel, they encountered other people for the first time. A small group of prospectors heading south, looking for gold in the hills. The men were rough but not threatening, and Daniel traded some supplies with them for information about the trail ahead. After the prospectors moved on, Daniel was quiet for a long time. "What is wrong?" Katherine asked finally. "Nothing wrong, exactly." Daniel guided his horse around a rocky section. "Just thinking. Those men, they saw you in that torn dress, wearing my jacket, traveling alone with me. They will talk, spread stories. By the time the tale reaches any town, it will be twisted into something it is not." Katherine felt her stomach sink. She had been so focused on escaping Thomas, on the simple day-to-day survival of travel, that she had not thought about how this would look to others. A respectable woman did not travel alone with a man she was not married to. Her reputation, already damaged by running from her wedding, would be completely destroyed. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "I did not think about what this would mean for you, what people would say." "I do not care what people say about me." Daniel's voice was firm. "I am worried about you. When we get to Montana, there will be questions. The Pattersons are good people, but others in town might not be so understanding." They rode in silence for a while, both absorbed in their thoughts. Katherine knew Daniel was right. She had traded one impossible situation for another. If she arrived in Montana traveling with Daniel, unmarried and clearly intimate in the way only travel companions could be, she would be labeled a fallen woman. No respectable family would hire her. No respectable man would court her. She had run from marriage to Thomas, only to find herself in a position where marriage to someone else might be her only option for social survival. The thought made her feel sick. She did not want to trap Daniel into anything. He had been nothing but kind to her, had asked for nothing in return. It would be deeply unfair to put him in a position where honor demanded he propose marriage to save her reputation. That night, as they made camp, Katherine decided to address the situation directly. "Daniel, when we reach Montana, I think it would be best if we parted ways outside of town. You can go on to the Pattersons and I will find my own way. That way no one will connect us and your reputation will not be damaged by association with me." Daniel, who had been unsaddling his horse, turned to look at her. "And what will you do? Where will you go?" "I will figure something out. I always do." "Katherine." He walked over to stand in front of her. "I am not going to abandon you on the outskirts of town with no money and no prospects. That is not how this works. I do not want to trap you into anything because of misplaced honor. Is that what you think this is?" Daniel's voice was soft but intense. Misplaced honor. Katherine met his eyes and felt her breath catch. There was something in his gaze, something heated and tender at once, that made her heart pound. "I do not know what this is," she whispered. "Neither do I exactly." Daniel reached up and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. but I know that I have not stopped thinking about you since the moment you stepped out from behind that pine tree. I know that I look for excuses to make you smile because your smile lights up everything around you. I know that the thought of leaving you alone to face the world makes me feel like someone is squeezing my chest in a vice. Catherine's eyes widened. Daniel, I am not good with words, he continued. I spend most of my time with horses, and they do not require pretty speeches. But I need you to know that if there is any honor involved in my actions, it is the honor of caring about someone who matters to me. You matter to me, Katherine Davies. You matter more than I thought anyone could matter after such a short time. You matter to me too, Katherine said, her voice barely above a whisper. So much that it frightens me. Daniel's hand was still against her cheek, warm and calloused and gentle. What frightens you? That I am feeling something real when everything is so uncertain. That I could be falling for you when we have only known each other for a week. That this could be wonderful and terrible all at once. Would it help if I told you I am falling for you too? Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. That depends. Are you saying it because you feel obligated or because you mean it? In answer, Daniel leaned down and kissed her. It was soft and sweet and nothing like the rough, demanding kisses Thomas had forced on her. Daniel kissed her like she was precious, like he was asking a question rather than taking an answer. His lips were warm against hers, and Katherine felt the world tilt on its axis. When they pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Daniel rested his forehead against hers. I mean it, he said. I am falling in love with you, and it has nothing to do with obligation and everything to do with who you are. You are brave and kind and smart and beautiful, and I cannot imagine going back to traveling alone after having you by my side. I am falling in love with you too. Katherine let the tears fall freely now. But I do not want you to marry me just to save my reputation. If we are going to do this, I want it to be real. I want it to be because we choose each other, not because society demands it. Daniel pulled back slightly, looking into her eyes. What if I want both? What if I want to marry you because I choose you and the fact that it also solves a social problem is just a bonus? Katherine laughed through her tears. Is that a proposal? Not a very good one. Daniel smiled, that rare, full smile that transformed his face. I do not have a ring, and you are wearing a torn wedding dress meant for another man, and we are standing in the middle of nowhere with nothing but a mule and a horse for witnesses. This is probably the worst possible moment for a proposal, or the best possible moment. Katherine put her hands on his chest, feeling his heart beating strong and steady beneath her palm. No pressure, no expectations, just two people choosing each other. Daniel covered her hands with his. Katherine Davies, I know we have only known each other a short time. I know this is fast and probably crazy, but I also know that I do not want to spend another day without you in my life. Will you marry me? Not because you have to, but because you want to. Katherine thought about all the reasons she should say no. They barely knew each other. He was a traveling man. She had just run from one wedding. Everything about this was impulsive and impractical, but she also thought about how safe she felt with him, how he made her laugh, how he treated her like an equal, not a possession, how his kiss had felt like coming home. Yes, she said. Yes, I will marry you, Daniel Ford. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Katherine wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with all the hope and fear and love tumbling through her heart. When they finally broke apart, both grinning like fools, the practical realities began to set in. We should get married before we reach Montana, Daniel said. There is a small settlement about 3 days from here, barely more than a trading post, but they have a minister. We can marry there, legal and proper. In my torn dress, Katherine gestured to the ruined gown, you could be wearing a flour sack and you would still be the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. Daniel's voice was absolutely sincere. "But if you want, we can see if the trading post has any fabric. You could make something new." Katherine looked down at her mother's dress, stained and torn beyond repair. It had brought her this far, carried her away from a terrible mistake and toward something wonderful. But it belonged to another life, another version of herself. "No," she said slowly. "I will wear this dress. It is part of my story, part of how I got here. The tears and stains are proof that I fought for my own happiness, that I chose myself even when it was hard. I want to marry you in this dress as I am, with no pretense or perfection." Daniel's eyes softened. "You are remarkable. You know that, do not you? I am learning." They spent the evening making plans and talking about the future. Daniel admitted that he had been thinking about settling down, that the constant travel was starting to wear on him. He had money saved, enough to buy some land and start a small horse ranch. "The Pattersons might know of some property for sale," he said. "Montana has good grazing land, plenty of water. I could breed and train horses, maybe take on a few students who want to learn." "And I could sew," Katherine added. "Not just mending, but maybe make clothes for the town, build up a clientele. We could build a life together." Daniel took her hand. "A real life on our own terms. I would like that." Katherine squeezed his hand. "I would like that very much." They traveled the next 3 days with a new energy, anticipation making the miles pass quickly. Daniel taught Katherine more about horses, and she discovered she had a real talent for working with them. He let her help with the training of a young mare he had in his string, and Katherine found it deeply satisfying to earn the animal's trust. "You are a natural," Daniel said, watching her work. "Most people try to force horses to obey, but you understand it is about partnership." "Maybe because I know what it is like to be forced," Katherine said quietly. "I would never want to do that to another living thing." On the 3rd day, they spotted the trading post in the distance. It was indeed small, just a handful of buildings clustered around a crossroads. But there was a church, a simple wooden structure with a cross on top, and that was all they needed. They arrived in the late afternoon. The minister, a weathered man named Reverend Horace, looked skeptical when Daniel explained that they wanted to be married. "Young man, I do not perform shotgun weddings or marriages of convenience," he said sternly. "This is neither," Daniel replied calmly. "This is 2 people who love each other and want to make it official in the eyes of God and the law." Reverend Horace looked at Katherine in her torn dress. "Miss, are you being coerced in any way?" "No, sir." Katherine met his eyes steadily. "I am choosing this freely. I love this man and I want to marry him." The minister studied them both for a long moment, then his expression softened. "All right then. I will marry you, but I will need 2 witnesses and it will cost you $5. The witnesses were found easily enough. The trading post owner and his wife, curious about the couple with the unusual story. Katherine could see them eyeing her torn dress, making assumptions, but she held her head high. Let them think what they wanted. She knew her own truth. They gathered in the small church as the sun began to set, golden light streaming through the simple windows. Katherine stood beside Daniel, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers that Mrs. Carson, the trading post owner's wife, had hastily gathered. Reverend Horace began the ceremony, his voice carrying the weight of tradition and authority. Katherine only half heard the words, too focused on Daniel standing beside her, solid and real and choosing her. When it came time for the vows, Daniel turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. "Katherine Davies, I promise to honor you, to protect you, to stand beside you in good times and bad. I promise to listen when you speak, to value your thoughts and dreams, to build a life with you where we are true partners. I promise to love you with everything I am, for as long as I live. Catherine's voice was steady despite her tears. Daniel Ford, I promise to honor you, to support you, to build a life with you based on respect and love. I promise to be brave, to speak my truth, to never let fear keep me from choosing happiness. I promise to love you with everything I am, for as long as I live. Reverend Horace pronounced them husband and wife, and Daniel kissed her there in the little church with the setting sun painting everything gold. When they pulled apart, Katherine saw something new in Daniel's eyes, wonder and joy and a hint of possessive pride that made her blush. "Hello, wife," he said softly. "Hello, husband." They signed the marriage certificate, making it legal and official. Daniel paid the minister and thanked the witnesses. Mrs. Carson pulled Katherine aside as they were leaving. "I do not know your story, dear, and I will not pry. But I can see that boy loves you something fierce. You hold on to that." She pressed a small package into Katherine's hands. "Just some bread and honey for a wedding gift, best I can offer on short notice." "Thank you." Katherine hugged the surprised woman. "You have been very kind." They spent their wedding night at the trading post, renting a small room that was clean if sparse. Daniel carried their packs up the stairs, suddenly shy now that they were alone and married. Katherine felt her own nervousness rising. She knew what was expected on a wedding night, though her knowledge was mostly theoretical. Thomas had tried to push for more before the wedding, but she had always refused, insisting on propriety even as she ignored the warning signs of his temper. Daniel set down the packs and turned to face her, his expression gentle. "Katherine, we do not have to do anything tonight. I know this has all happened very fast, and I do not want you to feel pressured." "I do not feel pressured." Katherine stepped closer to him. "I feel nervous, but that is different. I have never been with a man before. Neither have I." At her surprised look, Daniel smiled slightly. "I mean, I have never been with a woman before. My mother raised me to believe that kind of intimacy should mean something, should be shared with someone you love. I never found that person until now." Katherine felt her eyes fill with tears again. Of course, Daniel was a virgin too. Of course he had saved himself, just as she had, for someone who mattered. "Then we will figure this out together," she said, reaching up to touch his face. "We will be each other's first and only." Daniel kissed her softly, then with increasing passion. They undressed each other slowly, learning the landscape of each other's bodies with hands and lips and whispered words. It was awkward at first, neither of them quite sure what they were doing, but it was also beautiful in its honesty. When they finally came together, Katherine felt a brief sharp pain that Daniel immediately noticed, freezing in concern. "Are you all right? Should I stop?" "No." Katherine wrapped her legs around him, holding him close. "Do not stop. I am all right, I promise." They moved together slowly, finding a rhythm that felt right. The pain faded into something deeper, more profound. Katherine understood for the first time what all the fuss was about, why people wrote poetry and songs about this. It was not just the physical sensation, though that was certainly pleasant. It was the intimacy of it, the vulnerability of sharing yourself so completely with another person, the trust required to let someone that close. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, sweaty and satisfied and utterly content. "That was nothing like I expected," Katherine said, tracing patterns on Daniel's chest. "Better or worse?" "Better, so much better." She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "Thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for choosing me." Daniel pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "I still cannot quite believe you are my wife." "Believe it, Mr. Ford. You are stuck with me now, best thing that ever happened to me, getting stuck with you." They made love again in the night, slower and more confident this time, learning what made each other gasp and sigh. Katherine discovered that she loved the feel of Daniel's hands on her body, rough from work but infinitely gentle. Daniel discovered that Katherine was surprisingly bold once she overcame her initial shyness, unafraid to show him what she liked. In the morning, they woke tangled together, the sun streaming through the window. Katherine felt different, transformed not by the physical act of marriage but by the emotional reality of it. She was a wife now, bound to another person by choice and by love. They had breakfast at the trading post, and Mrs. Carson smiled knowingly at them. "You newlyweds have that look about you. All shiny and new." Katherine blushed but did not deny it. She was happy, gloriously happy in a way she had never expected to be. They continued north toward Montana, now traveling as husband and wife. The difference was subtle but profound. Daniel was more openly affectionate, taking her hand as they walked, kissing her whenever the mood struck. Katherine felt free to lean into him, to seek his comfort, to claim him publicly as hers. The landscape began to change as they moved further north, becoming more mountainous and wild. Daniel pointed out landmarks, told her stories about the land and the people who lived there. Katherine absorbed it all, fascinated by this world she was entering. They were about 2 days from the Pattersons' ranch when they encountered trouble. 4 men on horseback blocked the trail ahead. They were rough-looking, armed, and their eyes held the kind of calculation that made Katherine's stomach clench. Daniel's hand went immediately to his rifle. "Afternoon, gentlemen. Something I can help you with," the leader, a burly man with a scar across his cheek, smiled unpleasantly. "Well now, that depends. We are just poor travelers who could use some supplies. Looks like you and your lady friend have plenty to spare. My wife and I have exactly what we need for our journey, nothing more." Daniel's voice was calm but firm. "I suggest you move along and we will do the same." "Your wife, is she?" The scarred man leered at Katherine. "Pretty thing like that, married to a half-breed. Hard to believe." Katherine felt Daniel tense beside her, but his voice remained level. "Believe what you want. We are passing through, same as you, no need for trouble." "Oh, I think there is every need for trouble." The scarred man gestured to his companions. "See, we have been on the trail a long time. We could use those horses, those supplies, and maybe some entertainment." Katherine felt ice flood her veins. She had heard stories about men like this, outlaws who preyed on travelers in the wilderness where there was no law to stop them. Daniel moved his horse slightly, positioning himself between Katherine and the men. "You really do not want to do this?" "I think we do." The scarred man reached for his gun. What happened next was almost too fast to follow. Daniel's rifle was up and firing before the outlaw's hand even touched his holster. The shot took the man in the shoulder, spinning him off his horse with a cry of pain. The other 3 men scrambled for their weapons, but Daniel was already moving, his horse trained for this kind of chaos. He fired again, hitting another man in the leg. "Katherine, run!" Daniel shouted. "Get to the trees!" But Katherine was not about to run and leave her husband to face 4 men alone. She grabbed the pistol Daniel had taught her to use over the past weeks and fired at the nearest outlaw. Her shot went wide, but it was close enough to make the man duck, giving Daniel time to fire again. This shot hit the 3rd man square in the chest. He fell from his horse and did not move. The 4th man, seeing his companions down, turned his horse and fled. The scarred leader, still alive but bleeding badly, tried to follow, slumped over his saddle. Daniel let them go, lowering his rifle as the sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance. "Are you hurt?" He turned to Katherine immediately, checking her over with frantic hands. "I am fine. Are you?" "Yes." Daniel pulled her close, holding her tight. "I am so sorry. I should have been more careful, should have taken a different route. You could not have known." Katherine was shaking now that the danger had passed, adrenaline making her legs weak. "Is that man dead?" They both looked at the outlaw lying motionless on the ground. Daniel dismounted and checked for a pulse, then nodded grimly. "I have never killed a man before." His voice was hollow. "I never wanted to." Katherine climbed down from the mule and went to him, taking his face in her hands. "You did what you had to do to protect us. That man was going to kill you, maybe kill both of us. You had no choice." "I know, but knowing does not make it easier." They took a few minutes to settle themselves, then searched the dead man for identification. He had no papers, nothing to indicate who he was or where he came from. Daniel buried him quickly, marking the grave with a simple cairn of stones. "Every man deserves a burial," he said quietly, "even bad ones." They moved on quickly, putting distance between themselves and the scene of the fight. Neither of them spoke much for the rest of the day, both processing what had happened. That night, as they lay together in their bedrolls, Daniel held Katherine close. "I was so afraid," he admitted. "When I saw those men looking at you, when I realized what they wanted to do. I have never been that afraid in my life. But you protected me, you kept me safe. What if I had not been fast enough? What if something had happened to you?" His voice broke slightly. "I just found you, Katherine. I cannot lose you." "You will not lose me." Katherine kissed him softly. "We are in this together, remember. For better or worse, in danger and in safety. Together." They made love that night with an urgency born of fear and relief, reminding themselves that they were alive, they were together, they had survived. 2 days later, they rode into the valley where the Patterson Ranch spread out across rich grazing land. It was beautiful country, with mountains rising in the distance and a river cutting through the property. The ranch house was large and well-maintained, with several outbuildings and corrals full of horses. As they approached, a woman emerged from the house, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun. "Daniel Ford," she called out with genuine pleasure. "We were not expecting you for another week." "Mrs. Patterson." Daniel dismounted and helped Katherine down. "I made better time than expected. I hope it is not an inconvenience." "Never an inconvenience." Mrs. Patterson was a handsome woman in her 40s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Her gaze moved to Katherine, taking in the torn dress and the wedding band on her finger. "And who is this?" "This is my wife, Katherine Ford." Daniel put his arm around Katherine's waist. "We married about a week ago." Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose, but her smile remained warm. "Well, congratulations are in order then. Please come inside. You must be exhausted from your journey." Inside, the ranch house was comfortable and inviting. Mr. Patterson, a gruff but friendly man, greeted them with hearty handshakes and many questions about their journey. Over dinner, Daniel explained how they had met, tactfully leaving out the details about Thomas and Katherine's flight from her wedding. "So you are looking for work as a seamstress?" Mrs. Patterson asked Katherine. "Yes, madam. I am skilled with a needle and I learn quickly." "She is being modest," Daniel interjected. "She is excellent. You should see the repairs she has made to my gear, and she made my shirts last twice as long as they should have." Mrs. Patterson studied Katherine thoughtfully. "I could certainly use someone with your skills, Mrs. Henderson, who used to sew for the town, moved back east last spring. Since then, people have been making do with whatever they can stitch themselves. If you are interested, I can introduce you around, help you build a clientele." "I would be very grateful for that." Katherine felt hope bloom in her chest. This could work. They could really build a life here. Over the next few days, the Pattersons helped Daniel and Katherine settle in. There was a small cabin on the property, not currently in use, that they could rent cheaply while they saved money for their own land. It needed some work, but it was structurally sound and had good bones. Daniel and Mr. Patterson spent their days looking at horses and discussing business, while Mrs. Patterson introduced Katherine around the small town. The women were initially skeptical of this newcomer in her torn dress with her rushed marriage, but Katherine's skill with a needle quickly won them over. Within a week, she had more work than she could handle. Mending, alterations, even a few requests for full garments. The money was not much, but it was hers, earned through her own labor, and it felt wonderful. Daniel, meanwhile, worked with Mr. Patterson to identify some land for sale. There was a property about 5 miles from the Patterson ranch, 200 acres with good water and grazing. The price was fair, and with the money Daniel had saved plus what they were both earning, they could afford it within a year or two. "We will build our own house," Daniel told Katherine one evening as they sat on the porch of their little cabin. "Nothing fancy, but solid. Room for a family if that is something you want." "I want that very much." Katherine leaned against him. "I want to build a life with you, have children, grow old together. Then that is what we will do." Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. Daniel worked with horses, building a reputation as an excellent trainer. Katherine's sewing business grew steadily. They saved money, made friends, became part of the community. 6 months after they arrived in Montana, they bought the land. Daniel immediately began work on a house, with help from Mr. Patterson and other neighbors. Barn raising was a community affair, and Katherine learned that frontier hospitality was real and generous. The house was finished by late fall, a sturdy 2-story structure with a wide porch and room to grow. Katherine sewed curtains for the windows and made quilts for the beds. Daniel built furniture from local wood. Together, they created a home. On their first night in the new house, they sat on the porch watching the sun set over their land. "You ever think about Fort Laramie?" Daniel asked quietly. "About what might have happened if you had married Thomas?" "Sometimes." Katherine threaded her fingers through his. "But only to remind myself how lucky I am. Running away in my mother's torn dress was the best decision I ever made because it led me to you. I am glad you were brave enough to run." Daniel kissed her temple. "I am glad you trusted me enough to come with me. I am glad for all of it, even the hard parts, because they brought us here. Do you ever regret giving up traveling, settling down in one place?" "Never." Daniel's voice was firm. "I spent years wandering because I was looking for something without knowing what it was. Now I know. I was looking for you for this, for home. I found it all at once." Katherine turned to kiss him properly. "I love you, Daniel Ford." "I love you too, Katherine Ford, more than I thought possible. That winter was hard, as Montana winters always were. But their house was warm and their supplies were good." Daniel continued training horses in the barn he had built, and Katherine sewed by the fire, often with neighbor women who came to visit and share news. In February, Katherine realized she had missed her monthly courses for 2 consecutive months. She recognized the other signs too: tender breasts, morning nausea, a strange tiredness that no amount of sleep could cure. She was pregnant. Katherine told Daniel one evening after dinner, nervous about his reaction. They had talked about children, but she was not sure he was ready for the reality of it quite so soon. "You are sure?" Daniel asked, his eyes wide. "As sure as I can be without a doctor's confirmation. But yes, I am sure." Daniel's face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. "We are going to have a baby. Katherine, we are going to be parents. You are happy about it?" "Happy. I am thrilled. I am terrified and thrilled and so grateful." He set her down gently, immediately solicitous. "Should you be on your feet? Do you need to sit down? What do you need?" Katherine laughed at his sudden concern. "I am pregnant, not ill. I can still move around and do things. But you should rest more and eat well, and not lift heavy things. "Daniel, I will be fine. Women have babies all the time." But he fussed over her anyway, and Katherine found it endearing rather than annoying. He was going to be such a good father. The pregnancy progressed normally. Katherine continued sewing, though she had to adjust some of her work as her belly grew. The neighbor women rallied around her, sharing advice and hand-me-down baby clothes. Mrs. Patterson was particularly helpful, having raised 5 children of her own. Daniel was a bundle of nervous energy, preparing the house for the baby. He built a beautiful cradle from pine wood and sanded it smooth as silk. He made sure they had plenty of firewood stacked for the winter, plenty of food stored. He talked to the baby through Katherine's belly, telling stories and singing songs he remembered from his childhood. "The baby can hear me, right?" he asked one evening, his hand splayed across Katherine's swollen stomach. "I think so. The midwife says babies know their parents' voices before they are even born. Then I want our child to know that they are loved, that they are wanted, that we will always be here." Daniel kissed Katherine's belly. "Hello in there, little one. I am your father, and I cannot wait to meet you." Katherine felt the baby kick in response, as if acknowledging Daniel's words. They both laughed at the movement, marveling at the life they had created together. In late September, almost exactly a year after Katherine had run from her wedding in Fort Laramie, she went into labor. It was long and difficult, as first births often were. The midwife, Mrs. Chen, was patient and encouraging. Daniel paced outside, not allowed in the room but close enough to hear everything. Every time Katherine cried out, he flinched. Finally, after 16 hours of labor, Katherine brought their child into the world. "It is a boy," Mrs. Chen announced, wrapping the baby in a soft blanket. "A healthy, strong boy." Daniel rushed into the room, his eyes going immediately to Katherine, who lay exhausted but radiant in the bed. "Are you all right?" he asked, taking her hand. "I am fine. We are both fine." Katherine smiled at the bundle in Mrs. Chen's arms. "We have a son, Daniel." Mrs. Chen placed the baby in Katherine's arms, and both parents stared in wonder at the tiny person they had made. He had Daniel's dark hair and Katherine's nose, a perfect blend of both of them. "He is beautiful," Daniel whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand. The infant immediately gripped his finger, holding on tight. "Hello, son. I am your father. I have been waiting to meet you." They named him Thomas James Ford, after both their fathers. Little Thomas was a good baby, sleeping well and eating enthusiastically. Daniel was a devoted father, getting up for night feedings and diaper changes without complaint. "I never knew I could love something this much," he told Katherine one night, holding their sleeping son. "I thought I knew love when I married you, but this is different. This is love upon love, building on itself." "I know exactly what you mean." Katherine watched her husband and son, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. "We made something wonderful, Daniel. We made a family." Life continued in its beautiful, ordinary way. Thomas grew into a bright, curious toddler. Daniel's horse training business thrived. Katherine's sewing brought in steady income. They saved money and expanded their property, buying another 100 acres when it came available. 3 years after Thomas was born, Katherine became pregnant again. This time it was twin girls, Emma and Rose, born during a summer thunderstorm. The house was suddenly full of noise and chaos and love. Daniel was outnumbered by females, but he loved it. He taught Thomas about horses and ranching, but also taught him to respect his sisters, to see them as equals. Katherine taught all 3 children to read and sew and cook, believing that knowledge was power regardless of gender. The years passed in a blur of skinned knees and school lessons, of holiday celebrations and quiet evenings on the porch. Daniel and Katherine grew older together, their love deepening with time and shared experience. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Daniel took Katherine back to the spot where he had first kissed her, on the trail heading north to Montana. They had arranged for the children to stay with the Pattersons for the night, giving them rare time alone. "You remember this place?" Daniel asked, dismounting from his horse. "How could I forget?" Katherine looked around at the familiar landscape. "This is where everything changed. Where you told me you were falling in love with me. I had no idea what I was doing." Daniel helped her down from her horse. "I just knew I could not let you go. You were this brave, beautiful woman in a torn dress, and you looked at me like I was something more than a wandering half-breed horse trader. You were always more than that to me." Katherine touched his face, now weathered by years but still handsome, still beloved. "You were my salvation and my choice, all wrapped up together. And you were mine." Daniel pulled her close. "That day in the forest when you stepped out from behind that tree in your mother's torn wedding dress, I thought you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I still think that every single day, even now, after 3 children and 10 years and all the hard work of building a life, especially now." Daniel kissed her softly. "Because now I know you in all your complexity. I know your strength and your fears, your dreams and your sorrows. I know the sound of your laugh and the feel of your hand in mine. You are more beautiful to me now than you were then, because now I understand what I am looking at. I am looking at my whole world." Katherine felt tears slide down her cheeks. "How did I get so lucky? How did running away from a terrible mistake lead me straight to the best thing in my life? Maybe because you were brave enough to choose yourself first. You did not let fear or desperation or what other people thought make your choices for you. You chose freedom, and that freedom led you to me." Daniel wiped her tears with his thumbs. "I am the lucky one, Katherine. Every day with you is a gift." They made love there in the forest, under the same trees that had sheltered them a decade before. It was different now, their bodies familiar with each other, their pleasure enhanced by years of learning what the other liked. But it was also the same, filled with the same tenderness and passion that had marked their first time together. Afterward, lying tangled together in the grass, Katherine said, "I want more years with you, so many more years." "You will have them." Daniel kissed her forehead. "We are going to grow old together, watch our children have children, build something that lasts beyond us." And they did exactly that. Thomas grew up to be a skilled rancher, taking over much of the day-to-day operations as Daniel's knees grew stiff with age. He married a local girl named Sarah, and they gave Katherine and Daniel their first grandchild, a boy they named Daniel after his grandfather. Emma became a teacher, opening a school on the edge of the property, and teaching not just reading and writing but practical skills that would serve her students well in the harsh Montana landscape. She married late, to a banker from Helena who respected her independence and shared her passion for education. Rose, the youngest and most adventurous, followed in her father's footsteps and became a horse trainer. She traveled all over the West, buying and selling horses, living the kind of free life that Katherine had once only dreamed about. She never married, but she had many friends and a life rich with experience and purpose. Daniel and Katherine watched their children grow and thrive, proud of the adults they had become. They had built something real and lasting, not just a house or a ranch but a legacy of love and courage and choosing your own path. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Daniel and Katherine sat on the porch of their house, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. They were both in their 50s now, hair graying and bodies slowing, but their love was as strong as ever. "You have any regrets?" Katherine asked, her hand in Daniel's. "Not a single one." Daniel squeezed her hand. "You Only that I did not run away sooner, Katherine smiled. Think of all the time we could have had together if I had not wasted 6 months being engaged to Thomas Brennan. We got the time we needed. Daniel pulled her close. And we are not done yet. We have years ahead of us still. They did have years, good years filled with grandchildren and quiet contentment. Daniel's knees eventually gave out completely, forcing him to retire from active ranch work, but he was content to sit and watch his son carry on the tradition. Katherine's eyesight faded, making detailed sewing work difficult, but she adapted, taking on larger projects and teaching young women in the community. When they were both in their late 60s, a young woman came to their door. She was maybe 20, thin and scared with a black eye and a torn dress. Katherine took one look at her and saw herself, 30 years earlier. "Come in," she said gently. "You are safe here." The young woman, whose name was Rachel, had been fleeing an arranged marriage to a man who beat her. She had run with nothing but the clothes on her back, desperate for help. Katherine and Daniel gave her shelter, gave her work, gave her time to heal and figure out what she wanted from life. They asked nothing in return except that she be honest with herself about what would make her happy. Rachel eventually married one of Thomas's ranch hands, a kind young man who treated her with respect and patience. At her wedding, she wore a simple dress that Katherine had helped her sew, nothing fancy but made with love. "Thank you," Rachel told Katherine the night before her wedding. "You and Mr. Ford saved my life." "No, dear," Katherine hugged her tight. "You saved your own life. You were brave enough to run, to choose yourself. We just gave you a safe place to land." Daniel passed away in his sleep when he was 72, his hand in Katherine's, his children and grandchildren nearby. It was peaceful, the kind of death everyone hopes for, and Katherine was grateful even through her grief. She lived another 5 years without him, surrounded by family, still sharp-minded and strong-willed. But everyone could see that a part of her had died with Daniel, that she was just waiting to join him. On what would have been their 37th wedding anniversary, Katherine Ford passed away in the house Daniel had built for her, wearing the locket her father had given her, and the wedding band Daniel had placed on her finger all those years ago. Thomas found her in the morning, a peaceful smile on her face and a letter addressed to him on her bedside table. "My dearest son," the letter read in Katherine's careful handwriting. "If you are reading this, then I have gone to join your father at last. Do not be sad for me. I have lived a full and beautiful life, far beyond what I ever dared to dream when I was a frightened young woman running through the forest in a torn wedding dress. Your father once told me that I was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, and he made me believe it. Not because of how I looked, but because of who I was. He saw my strength when I could only see my fear. He saw my courage when I felt like a coward. He loved me for exactly who I was, and that love made me brave enough to become who I wanted to be. I hope you find that kind of love, my son. I hope all my children do. The kind that makes you braver and stronger and more yourself. The kind that builds rather than diminishes. The kind that lasts beyond death itself. Take care of this ranch, this land that your father and I built together. Take care of each other. And remember that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is run away from what is wrong, straight toward what is right. I love you all, more than words can say." Your mother, Katherine Ford Thomas, read the letter aloud to his sisters at their mother's funeral, held on the ranch under a clear Montana sky. They buried her next to Daniel, under a cottonwood tree they had planted together 40 years earlier. On her headstone, Thomas had inscribed, "Katherine Ford, 1858–1913, beloved wife, mother, and grandmother, she ran toward freedom and found love, she chose herself, and created a legacy. The ranch continued to thrive. passed down through generations. The story of Katherine and Daniel became family legend, told and retold to children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and beyond. They spoke of the woman who ran from her wedding in a torn dress, the cowboy who said she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, and the love they built that lasted beyond their lifetimes. They spoke of courage and choice, of finding home in another person, of building something real and lasting from nothing but determination and love. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew through the cottonwood tree and the sun set gold over the Montana mountains, people swore they could feel Daniel and Katherine there still, together as they always had been, as they always would be, their love an enduring presence in the land they had claimed and the family they had built. The legacy of that torn dress and that first meeting in the forest lived on, a reminder that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best, that courage can look like running away, and that true love is not about perfection or propriety but about choosing each other every single day until death and beyond.